This is fictional story to bring faith in heart.
It wasn't meant to be a deep night. Not like this. They were supposed to talk about space, maybe politics, maybe Mars and media empires. But the air had shifted. The room had grown quieter than either of them was used to, like even the walls were leaning in to listen. Elon Musk sat on the edge of the long oak table, fingers laced, eyes distant but focused. Donald Trump was standing, glass of Diet Coke in hand, staring at nothing in particular, maybe a painting that didn't quite match the wallpaper. Neither man spoke for a while. And then Elon did something strange. He leaned in slightly, as if breaking some unspoken contract between two titans. The kind of contract where men build rockets and skyscrapers, but never show their questions. Elon doesn't ask questions like this, he thought, not out loud. But he asked anyway, "Do you believe God sees us?" Trump chuckled, the way a man laughs when a question catches him off guard, but he wants to seem in control. "You mean like, watches over us?" he asked, waving his hand like he was brushing it away. But Elon didn't answer. He didn't smile. He didn't flinch. So Trump's smile faded. There was a pause, a longer one, the kind that forces you to remember you're human. "I mean," Trump said slowly, finally, "people pray. I've prayed. I was confirmed, Presbyterian, all that. Good roots, good values, the Bible, best book. Still read it." Elon didn't blink. "But I don't know if I've ever asked that. Not like that." Trump's voice softened, just a little. "Like really? Does God see me?" He sat down. It was strange how small the room had become. Elon nodded slowly, almost imperceptibly. "Sometimes I wonder," he said, "if we're so obsessed with being seen by the world because we're afraid we're invisible to something bigger." Trump exhaled, almost laughed again, but not quite. "You sound like a monk now." Elon looked down at his hands. "I'm not a religious person, but there are nights, sometimes late, when everything's quiet, when I wonder if we've all been trying to prove something to a God we're not sure exists." Trump tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "Prove what?" he asked. Elon didn't answer right away. "Maybe that we matter." That word, matter, hung in the room like a sacred echo. Trump looked at the floor. "Growing up," he said slowly, "my father, he wasn't much for softness. Success mattered. Being tough mattered. Feelings? Not really." There was something in his voice that cracked, not loud, just enough to be real. "I guess somewhere in my head, I thought if I built something big enough, loud enough, maybe even God would have to notice." Elon nodded again. "Maybe we all do that." There was a long silence, the kind that doesn't feel empty, but sacred. "You know," Trump said finally, "when I was a kid, I used to pray under the covers. Didn't want anyone to hear me. I'd just whisper into the dark. I think I was afraid God wouldn't listen unless I got the words right." He looked up, eyes glossy but proud. "Do you think he listens to people like us?" Elon's voice was soft now. "I think the question isn't whether he listens, it's whether we remember how to speak." Trump didn't respond. He just stared, like he'd wandered into a part of his soul he hadn't visited in decades. And then Elon asked it, the one question that cracked something open in both of them. "Do you think God sees the man, or the boy we buried beneath the man?" Trump blinked, once, twice. He didn't speak, because maybe for the first time in a very long time, he didn't know how. Trump didn't answer right away. He just sat there, not as a former president, not as the CEO of skyscrapers or the icon of empire, but as a man who, for one rare, unguarded moment, felt completely seen and wasn't sure if he liked it. boy," he said quietly, as if testing the words for the first time. "I don't know if I ever let that kid grow up, or if I buried him too early." Elon shifted slightly, still watching, still waiting. Trump leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling like it might give him some kind of answer. "My father used to tell me, 'Don't cry, winners don't cry,' so I didn't." He glanced down. "And I won, a lot. At least, I thought I did." There was a weight in the room now, something heavier than ambition, something ancient. "You ever cry?" Trump asked suddenly, his voice gruff. "I mean really cry?" Elon nodded. "Yeah," he said. "Once during a launch. Falcon 1. Everything failed. Everything. Years of work. Gone in seconds. I walked out onto the sand afterward and cried so hard I thought I'd break." He paused. "But it wasn't just the rocket. It was all the people who believed in me. The ones I let down. The dream I thought maybe God had given me. It felt like he'd gone silent." Trump raised an eyebrow. "So you believe he speaks?" Elon looked uncertain. "I think maybe he speaks in the spaces between the noise, but we fill every inch with ambition and pride and power until there's no room left to hear anything." He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Do you ever feel like you spent your whole life trying to be seen and still somehow feel invisible?" Trump looked away. "That's the part nobody tells you," he muttered. "That you can be famous in every corner of the world and still feel like a ghost when you lie down at night." The words weren't bitter. They weren't dramatic. They were just true. Elon's eyes softened. Maybe God doesn't look at what we've built. Maybe he looks at what we've hidden. Trump let out a breath, like something inside him had just quietly collapsed. "I used to have this dream," he said, "back when I was a kid. I'd be walking through a house. Not Trump Tower, not anything grand. Just a small, quiet house. And there'd be a room I wasn't supposed to go into. But I'd open the door, and there was this little boy sitting in the corner, crying." He hesitated. I think the boy was me." Elon swallowed hard. "What did you do?" "I'd close the door." Neither spoke, for a long while. Then Elon whispered, "What if God never closed the door?" Trump looked at him sharply. "What if he's been waiting?" Elon continued. "Not for the man with the towers, but for the boy who still cries behind the door." The silence in the room shifted. It wasn't cold anymore. It was holy. "I don't know how to go back," Trump said, barely audible. Elon met his eyes. "Maybe you don't go back. Maybe you open the door and sit with him. That's it." Trump looked stunned, not by the simplicity, but by how impossible that sounded. Then, for the first time in the entire conversation, he whispered something not to Elon, but almost to himself. "What if I don't know how to love him?" Elon sat still, and this time it was his voice that trembled. "Then maybe that's where faith begins." A long, aching pause. Trump nodded slowly, almost like something was breaking open and letting light in, but just barely, just enough. But then he said something unexpected. "What if God gave up on me?" Elon turned to him with a steadiness that wasn't arrogant or cold. It was tender. "What if the only one who ever gave up was you?" Trump didn't speak for a while after that. He just stared down at his hands. They were motionless, not clenched, not performing, just there. For the first time in decades, maybe, they weren't trying to build anything. "You know," he said finally, "there are days I don't know where the act ends, and I begin." Elon nodded slowly, the way a man does when he recognizes something too familiar. We get good at becoming what people expect, Elon said, voice low. And eventually, we forget who we were before they started watching. Trump looked over, eyes glassy. I've been watched my whole life, judged, praised, hated. I don't even know what silence sounds like anymore. He paused. I think that's why your question hit me. Do you believe God sees us? He looked down again. Because sometimes I wonder if he does. Would I even recognize myself in his eyes? The words hung heavy in the air. Elon didn't rush to respond. He let it breathe. I think, Elon said finally, God doesn't see the masks. He sees the soul behind them, even the ones we've forgotten about. Trump scoffed softly, not sarcastic, more like an ache he didn't want to feel. My mother used to sing to me, he said suddenly. Hymns, soft ones. She had this old Scottish accent. I can still hear it sometimes when the world goes quiet enough. He swallowed. She told me once that love doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and you have to be still enough to hear it. Elon blinked. Did you believe her? Trump hesitated. I did. But then the world got loud. I got loud. I thought strength was noise. Thought I had to be louder than my father's absence. Louder than the fear. He leaned forward, pressing his palms together like he was holding something fragile. You know what no one talks about, he said. The fear of being small, of being nothing. I think that's why I kept building. I wanted the skyline to say I mattered. Elon nodded. I understand. Trump looked at him, a little surprised. Do you? Elon didn't flinch. Yeah, I thought if I reached far enough into the stars, maybe I'd find God waiting there. Or maybe I was just trying to outrun the silence. They sat with that. Two men with empires and wounds. What do you think God wants from us? Trump asked, barely above a whisper. Elon took a long breath. I don't think it's our greatness. I think he just wants what we buried, the tenderness, the humility, the quiet love we were too proud to admit we needed. Trump looked down. I haven't prayed in years, he said. Elon didn't respond. I used to think prayer was begging, like weakness. But lately, I've wondered if maybe prayer is just letting yourself be seen again. He looked up slowly. I'm scared to be seen. Elon finally spoke, voice steady, soft. Me too. There it was. No armor, no bravado. Just two boys in older bodies trying to remember how to be small without being afraid. I had this moment, Elon said, after my son died. Nevada. I kept asking God why. Begging, bargaining. Nothing came, just silence. But in that silence, there was something. Not an answer, just presence. Trump's eyes darkened with a different kind of weight. Not politics, not pressure. Something raw. I'm sorry, he said genuinely. Elon nodded. I think that's when I started believing God isn't always loud. He's not the earthquake. He's the quiet hand that stays when everyone else leaves. Trump exhaled, long and slow. I don't know if I believe that yet, he said. Elon didn't try to convince him. You don't have to. Maybe belief isn't a moment. Maybe it's a return. To what? Trump asked. And Elon answered with something that didn't sound like science. To the parts of us we left behind when we chose power over peace. There was a stillness in that, a painful stillness. And then Trump whispered something that broke the moment open. What if I don't know how to go back? What if God never asked you to? Trump leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling like it might open up and pour out the answers he'd avoided his whole life. Elon watched him quietly, not as a rival or an icon, but as someone who understood what it meant to carry ghosts. What if God never asked you to go back? Trump repeated, his voice almost childlike. Elon nodded gently. Maybe. Maybe God doesn't want the version of us we were. Maybe he just wants us here, now, honest. Trump looked over, his eyes glassy again. But what if the man I am now doesn't deserve it? The words sat there. They didn't explode. They didn't try to impress. They just ached. Elon leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. Deserve what? Trump didn't answer at first. Then, barely above a whisper, forgiveness. Elon didn't speak for a while. When he did, his voice was softer than it had ever been. Do you think a child has to deserve his father's arms before he runs into them? Trump blinked. Something cracked in his chest. You could almost hear it. I hurt people, he said. Pushed people away. Made the world about me because I didn't know how to be small without feeling weak. Elon nodded. So did I, he said. In different ways. People I loved. People who believed in me. He looked down at the table. Sometimes I think God lets us fall, not to punish us, but to remind us what it feels like to need grace. Trump stared at him. Do you think he still offers it? Elon's voice was barely audible. I think grace is the one thing we can never outrun, but it's also the one thing we keep trying to. The room grew still again, the kind of stillness that asks you to be honest, not with the world, but with yourself. I don't know how to accept it, Trump said. I know how to win. I know how to fight. But I don't know how to be forgiven. Elon leaned back, looked out the window. Maybe it's not something you earn. Maybe it's something you let happen. Trump looked confused. But how? Elon turned toward him. By not hiding anymore. By letting God see the part of you that cries in the room no one else knows exists. Trump shook his head. That part of me is weak. No, Elon said firmly, for the first time with fire in his tone. That part of you is honest. Vulnerability isn't weakness. It's where love begins. Trump was silent. You could see the battle in his face. Pride and longing, fighting like waves against a crumbling wall. Jesus said something once, Elon continued. He said, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Trump raised an eyebrow. Poor in spirit? What does that even mean? It means the ones who know they can't do it alone, the ones who've come to the end of themselves. Trump scoffed gently. I'm not used to being poor in anything. Maybe that's the point, Elon said. You've built towers, you've sat in the highest office. But have you ever let yourself be empty? Trump's jaw tightened, then loosened. I don't think I know how. You don't have to, Elon said. You just have to stop pretending you're full. The silence that followed wasn't painful. It was reverent, almost like they weren't the only ones in the room anymore. Then slowly, like peeling off a mask that had grown into his skin, Trump whispered, I used to wonder if my dad would ever be proud of me. Elon looked at him gently. And now? Trump's voice trembled. Now I wonder if God ever was. There it was, the real question, the one behind the noise, the one buried beneath decades of applause and controversy and defense. Elon leaned in. Maybe pride isn't what God gives, he said. Maybe what he gives is presence, even when we've forgotten how to receive it. Trump stared at him. I don't know if I can believe that. Elon didn't push. He just asked, do you want to? And that question, simple, quiet, devastating, echoed louder than any applause ever could. Trump didn't answer right away. The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire long put out. Do you want to believe that God is still with you, even now? His eyes dropped to the table. Fingers that once gripped boardroom pens and executive orders now just sat still. For a moment, he looked like a man who had run so far, for so long, that he'd forgotten what rest even felt like. I think, he said slowly, I wanted the world to worship me, because deep down, I was afraid God wouldn't. There was no smugness, no joke, just a man staring into the cavern of his own heart and finally saying what was buried in it. Elon didn't flinch. He just nodded. I used to think the applause would fill the hole, Trump continued. The interviews, the rallies, the headlines. But every night I came home, I was still alone with myself, and the noise was gone, and it was quiet, and I hated that. He rubbed his eyes, suddenly looking old, not in years, but in weariness. Have you ever looked in the mirror and realized you don't even know who's looking back? Elon's throat tightened. I've had nights, he said, where I stood in front of the mirror after some massive success and felt nothing, no joy, just this haunting question, what's all this for? Trump nodded. I thought being remembered would make me feel real. Elon leaned in, voice soft. Did it? No, Trump admitted. It just made the mask thicker. He closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them again, there was something raw, not broken, but tender. I don't think I'm afraid of death, he said. I think I'm afraid of living, without being truly loved. Elon swallowed. The quiet after that was almost holy. I don't think love is something you earn, he said gently. I think it's something you let reach you, even when you don't feel worthy. Trump looked over. Even after all the mistakes? Especially after, Elon replied. That's where love is most real. Not when we impress, but when we fall, and someone stays. Trump looked away. Who would stay for me? Elon was quiet for a beat. Then, God. Trump shook his head, not in anger, in disbelief. I wouldn't stay for me. Elon leaned back. That's why grace is grace, because we don't stay for ourselves, but he stays. Trump was visibly fighting something. Pride, maybe, or pain, or the terrible fear that maybe, just maybe, he was still loved despite the wreckage. When my brother died, Trump said suddenly, I didn't cry. I stood at the funeral like a statue. People kept saying he was in a better place, but all I could think was, I never told him I loved him. He looked down, his voice cracking. Maybe I didn't know how. Elon didn't speak. I've spent my life in buildings, Trump continued, but I don't think I've ever built something that could hold love. Elon's voice was a whisper now. Maybe that's what God's been waiting for. For what? For you to build one now. Trump laughed, but it was a sad, tired laugh. I don't know where to begin. Elon looked at him. Start by walking into the room. Trump blinked. The room? The one with the boy in the corner, the one you keep closing the door on. Trump's breath caught. What if he doesn't want me? Elon said nothing. He just reached into his pocket, pulled out a small folded photo, old, worn, creased from years of keeping. He laid it gently on the table. It was a photo of a little boy smiling beside a model rocket. The boy was Elon. He was afraid once, too, Elon said. Thought no one would believe in him. Trump stared at it. His face softened in a way few had ever seen. I don't have a picture like that, he whispered. Then go make one, Elon replied. A long pause. Then Trump asked, barely audible, what if I don't know how to love the boy I used to be? Elon looked at him with eyes that somehow held both the ache of loss and the hope of faith. Then let God teach you. They sat in silence, two men who had crossed oceans of ambition only to find themselves shipwrecked on the same island. The need to be loved, to be seen, not for what they built, but for who they were when the building stopped. Trump stared at the photograph on the table like it held a map to something he'd lost decades ago. "I used to think God watched me from far away," he said, "like a judge in the clouds, tallying up all my wins and failures." Elon nodded. "And now?" Trump took a long breath. "Now I wonder if he's been in the room the whole time, not judging, just waiting." The photo fluttered slightly under the breath of the air conditioner. That tiny sound, so small, so human, was almost poetic. "I've lived a life louder than most," Trump said. "And yet, the voice I miss the most is the one I never really listened to." Elon didn't press. He just let the truth linger. Trump looked out the window. What does a man do when he realizes he's been asking the wrong questions his whole life? Elon folded his hands, quiet. He learns to ask better ones. Trump turned to him, eyes tired but honest. "Like what?" Elon shrugged gently. "Like, what would I do if I believed I was already loved? Who would I be if I stopped trying to earn it?" Trump let those questions settle inside him. "I don't know," he said. "That's okay," Elon replied. "The road back to grace isn't made of answers. It's made of surrender." Trump gave a slow nod, like someone hearing a foreign language, but understanding the emotion behind it. "You said something earlier," he said, "that maybe belief isn't a moment, maybe it's a return." Elon smiled faintly. "Yeah." "A return to what?" Trump asked again, softer this time. Elon looked him in the eyes. "To love." The word didn't feel sentimental. It didn't feel religious. It felt real. A silence followed, one that didn't demand filling. And in that stillness, Trump looked different, not undone, not transformed, but cracked open, like soil finally ready for seed. Elon stood up, slowly, reverently. He walked to the window, stared out at the city below. "All of this," he said, "all the noise, the towers, the brands, the arguments, it'll fade. History will forget more than it remembers." He turned back. "But the boy you were, the child who wanted to be seen, he's still there, and he still matters." Trump stood, almost unsure of his own legs. "And if I fail again?" he asked, his voice unsteady. Elon gave a half smile. "Then you're human." Trump chuckled softly. "That's terrifying." "It is," Elon agreed. "But it's also sacred." They shook hands, not as titans, not as icons, but as men. And just before Elon turned to leave, Trump asked one final question, not loud, not strategic, just real. "Do you think God still speaks?" Elon paused, then turned back, and with the calm certainty of someone who'd once prayed through grief and found silence that held him like a father, he said, "I think he never stopped." Trump swallowed hard. "What if I can't hear him?" Elon's eyes were kind. "Then be still long enough for your soul to remember the sound." He left the room. Trump sat back down, alone again, but not the same kind of alone. The photo still lay on the table, the boy and the rocket. He stared at it. Then slowly, with hands that had signed deals and executive orders and checks worth millions, he folded them together, closed his eyes, and whispered something too quiet for any camera to catch. Not a prayer of power, not a speech, just a whisper. And in that moment, for the first time in years, he didn't feel watched. He felt seen, not by a crowd, not by a camera, but by something, someone, who had never left. And maybe never would.